What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the best indie games that I've played in 2025, which, truth be told, is a category of games that I haven't spent a lot of time on this year. In fact, there's going to be some notable absences from this that I'm sure people will mention in the comments, like Blueprints, maybe Silksong. And I'm sure those games are quite good, judging by the general reception. However, I personally haven't played them, so it wouldn't really make any sense for them to be on here. Now, the reason for that really is that I've been focusing a lot of my attention this year on getting through some really large games that I knew were going to take a while, and in fact, that continues to be the case through much of the rest of this year. I'm currently reviewing an indie title, Avernum 4, that'll be done in a few days, but after that, it's pretty much a wrap on indie games for me this year, as much of what I've got left of November and December is pretty much entirely spoken for, with other projects and games in the works, so it felt as good a time as any to drop this particular video, so I could at least give some of these games their due, as people are looking to pick up things to get them through what's left of the year. However, probably worth a mention that of the indie games I have played, a significant chunk of them turned out to be the Avernum series. Avernum 4, which I just mentioned, of course, that I'm still going through, but in order to get ready for that, I played through Avernum 1, 2, and 3 earlier in the year. And so, of the indies that I did play, the Avernum series takes up like probably 40-ish% of all of them, which I thought was kind of funny. Otherwise, though, let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, I want to kick this off with the one I actually have not reviewed, but I did play through all of just on my own time. This happens occasionally with games that, like a checkout video or a first impressions type of video just kind of covers everything I had to say about it, and I think you'll get the gist of it. And in those situations, doing like a full review just doesn't feel like the correct move, and that is one such case with the game The RPG, which is actually a pretty unique experience, aiming to what could probably be most easily described as a parody Skyrim. It sees you exploring a land ruled by the very cool king as you get to the bottom, quite literally, of the dungeon business that is going on here, with you buying tickets to delve into these different floors to pick up loot. And as you would expect, there's a lot of like meta commentary on video games in general in there. But the thing about parody type games is that if you really want to actually be memorable, the catch is you have to be a good game at the same time. And I think the RPG really manages to thread that needle in a fun way that I think does exactly the thing it's trying to do while being really funny. And with a grand total runtime of somewhere between probably like 5 to 10 hours for most people, it's time well spent and a fun way to kill an afternoon or something. But that brings us to our second entry. So this one is Bloomtown, a different story, which technically I believe released last year, but it's a game I would wanted to play, and given what the game is about, which is kids during summertime dealing with Lucifer, it felt like an appropriate summer adventure for myself. But the gist of Bloomtown is basically, in terms of gameplay, a really like a relaxed version of something like Persona, with the catch being that you play two kids sent to their grandfather's house to spend the summer while their parents deal with some more serious things like navigating a divorce, it would seem. The catch there being that these kids quickly get involved in a plot with none other than Lucifer himself, who's going to grant you some powers to deal with the demons that have been haunting the town and contributing to some surprisingly dark subject matter like disappearing kids, self-harm, abuse, and a lot of other stuff on top of that. So, despite the graphics giving you a feeling that this might be a more kid-friendly title, not really, to be honest, though I did love the way their sort of pixel art here looks, and while it's not a particularly deep game or anything, I had a lot of fun with it. It is, again, a kind of game that really nails that sort of summer vibe, which was exactly what I was looking for when I played it, and as such, I had a really good time with this one. But speaking of dark subject matter, I would say a potential contender for best indie game of the year, for me at least, was definitely The Necromancer's Tale, a CRPG that does something incredibly specific. As the name would imply, puts you in the role of an up-and-coming necromancer as you seek power through undeath. And if that sounds like something you would enjoy and you don't mind a bit of jank that comes with an indie title like this, then it is really, really fun. I think it nails the exact sort of vibe and esoteric nature of what is theoretically supposed to be involved in becoming something undead and scary. But probably the best part about it, to me at least, is that you are put in this town with like proper NPCs with names and schedules and stuff, and you do actually have to hide your activities from them, and as you increasingly move down that path of necromancy, that becomes more and more difficult to do in a way that definitely feels like a sort of death by 1,000 cuts type of thing. At first it's just small things, and the next thing you know, you're in over your head, committing truly heinous acts as the story ramps up. And while if you want anything beyond that experience, it's probably not the game for you. I don't think the combat is anything to write home about. There's actually an option to just turn it off altogether, basically, and completely go narrative. But if that sounds like the type of thing that is of interest to you, then I think The Necromancer's Tale does that very well and is worth your time, which is why I enjoyed it so much. But that does bring us to our fourth entry, which is a bit different because it's none other than Eriksholm, The Stolen Dream. A nice and short little stealth adventure game that puts you in the role of a couple different characters, really, but primarily a young girl named Hannah, a street urchin who, after the disappearance of her brother, goes on a big search to find him, which then leads to a whole bunch of other events that are really interesting. And really the standout thing here is the way the narrative is displayed through its really impressive cutscenes, with the gameplay itself really being like a stealth puzzler with more often than not like one solution through an area. So it's relatively short, it's fun. If you enjoy that kind of thing, the story's pretty interesting, and it's all presented in what feels like a really, really well-polished state. The downside being that does come with a bit of a premium. The base price for this is like $40, and it's not a game that's going to take you very long. Like probably sub 10 hours, but if you don't mind that, basically everything else about Eriksholm is a really good time. But that does bring us to our final entry, which is probably as good as time as any to mention that these were obviously not in any particular order. This one just happens to be last, and that is none other than Avernum 1. As I mentioned a few times throughout this video, I've played a lot of Avernum this year across the series of games, but the one that is definitely my favorite of all of them that I've played is actually the first one. As tends to be the case, it does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of like introducing the lore and stuff, and in Avernum you are thrown into a land known as Avernum, a gigantic underground cavern system where people were initially sent down as exiles, but that evolves over the course of the series. And while I've enjoyed pretty much all of the games, one I think is really the standout because of how it approaches like exploration and chasing down the end game. You see, the first game basically has like 3 quests more or less that can all lead to a potential ending. This is as simple as like just get out of here or find a way back to the surface more or less, but then there's also more direct goals in the sense of punishing the people who sent you down here to begin with. And the true ending is like basically getting all of those at once, as you can keep playing after they're done. And that, on top of some really great like world building and stuff, makes for, I think, the best cohesive experience of the ones I've played so far. However, I will give the other entries into the series some of their due because they do have a lot of really interesting mechanics. Like the third one, for instance, has like this monster plague mechanic where like towns can get destroyed, things like that. But as the best like total package, it's definitely the first title for me. But realistically, as we move to wrap up this video, just to throw it out there once again, I didn't play a ton of indies this year. In fact, I would go so far as to say that I bet at least a few of the people watching this and will likely be in the comment sections shortly have played a lot of other ones that I would love to hear about. Again, I think Blueprints and like Silksong as an example will come up. There are some other games I considered throwing on here that I think are probably slightly more in the AA space, and while I can appreciate an argument about the bounds of what is and isn't indie versus AA, ultimately I had to make a choice, but nonetheless, feel free to drop those games in here as well. It's not that big a deal to me personally. But regardless of how you want to split those hairs, by all means, drop a comment down in the comment section below and like and subscribe while you're at it, I suppose. All that YouTube jazz, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.